How's it going, everybody? I hope you are all having a wonderful day. In today's build, we're making a tealight candle holder that is very easy to scale in production and is also a great seller. Let's get started. Let's face it, woodworking is an expensive hobby. It seems like every little thing that you want to do to a piece of wood has a little tool that associates with it, and all of those things really add up. Not to mention the space that you might need to be able to pursue that hobby. When I started woodworking, I was just coming out of school. I didn't have a whole lot of money, but I really wanted to pursue the hobby because it's very tactile and I enjoyed it a lot, and I still enjoy it to this day. But at the time, I really wanted the hobby to fund itself, and so I did projects that I sold, and with some of the profits, I used that to reinvest into my hobby and bought more tools, and I just kind of kept that going. While furniture projects are always going to be in fair demand and they're always a great way to generate revenue, with lumber prices as high as they are right now, it might be a good time to shift focus towards the smaller side of projects. But still keeping in mind that, while the project may require less lumber, it's still going to require some level of labor, but this is how you improve your skill as a woodworker. The other thing is pursue designs that you can do in a systematic fashion to scale up production so that your contact time, the hours that you put in building each one, if you do it in a production setting or if you do it in a production way in a small shop, you're able to bring the amount of labor down and be able to generate a higher profit margin. While it may feel very tempting to make a whole bunch of cutting boards and sell those because they're beginner-friendly projects and they're kind of fun to do, I said that of course you should do that, make cutting boards and sell those if that's what works for you. But in addition to that, do something that's a little bit unique, a little different, that catches the attention of a potential client, right? So in this video, I'm going to show you how I make these dovetailed candle holders. Now, this project does require the use of a router table, and I recognize that not everyone has a router table available to them. So stick around to the end. I'll show you another design that you can do that kind of achieves a very similar look without the need for a router table. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you are new to this channel, welcome. It's wonderful having you on the channel. If you are not subscribed already, please do me a favor, hit the like button below and consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoy the content. Every single likes and subscriptions really do give me the energy to keep going, keep making more content for you guys. Speaking of things that are valuable to you, with this design, feel free to copy it. You're not gonna hurt my feelings. Copy it. If it works well for you, go for it. I want you to be successful in woodworking. I want you to enjoy the hobby of woodworking because it's a lot of fun. So anyways, with that being said, let's get started to the build. Of all the candle holders that I've made, this is the design that I've kept for myself to use in my own home. I really like the proportion of it. I like the fact that it has 3 tiers of candles. I like the height. I kind of like everything about this particular design. So for this video, I want to focus on building this specific design and replicating it. However, that is not to say that you have to stay married to this design. You can make it 5 tiers, you can make it narrower if you want, you can make it taller if you want. It's really entirely up to you in how you want to build this project and what fits your needs and your local clientele. And as far as the dimensions go, this is 13 inches long, 4.25 inches wide, and the top is just a little over 1.5 inches thick. And in this project, because the dovetail goes all the way through the material, what you don't want is, opposing expansion and contraction issues throughout the season. So, this Paduk wood in the middle here, it's not really going to expand and contract this way. In fact, it's going to potentially expand and contract this way, so it might get taller and a little shorter throughout the season. However, the top wants to expand and contract in all kinds of ways depending on how the wood is cut. So it helps if you use a piece of wood that is as close to quarter sawn as possible, because that way the wood isn't expanding and contracting this way nearly as much, and instead it's expanding and contracting this way. So it's changing in height, but it's not changing in width. And that's going to mean that the piece of dovetail wood that we put in here does not become too long or too short throughout the season. Okay, so onto the build for this project. I have a piece of cherry in here that has already been dimensioned, and I'm going to make the assumption that for this project you already know how to dimension a piece of lumber to be square, flat, etc. And in this case, you can tell this cherry is again, you know, as close to quarter sawn as possible, given the size of this tree. And what I have is the length is in fact 13 inches, exactly as the original piece we're trying to replicate. I have left the width a little oversized, so it's at 4.5 inches instead of 4.25. And the reason for it is I anticipate that we're going to have a little bit of tear out on the edges, or we might need to trim that to final width, and that's why I left it a little oversized. The thickness of this is pretty much in line with the thickness of our original piece, so it's just a little over 1.5 inches. So in the router table, I have mounted a dovetail bit. I don't really remember the specific kind that this one is, but I will put a link in the description below for those of you who are interested in this exact one. But any dovetail bit that you have at hand is perfectly fine for this project. And what I'm going to do, in here I marked a 0.5 inch line that's going to mark the height, and so I'm just going to drop the bit to that height, and I think that's probably pretty good. All right, so with the height adjusted, I'm going to take a quick little pass just to make sure that we are in fact at the right height. And then with the caliper, we can measure to make sure that it is very close to 0.5 inches, and it is. So we can move forward now. So using the original as a model, we know that the distance from the center of this dovetail to the edge is about 1 inch and 3/8. So what I did is I marked a 1 3/8 inch of a line, and I'm going to adjust the fence so that this is roughly in the middle. This is not a critical thing, by the way, so don't get too hung up on this particular measurement. As long as it's kind of close, I think you're pretty good. You could go further out, you can go closer in, doesn't matter all that much. Whenever you're cutting a channel like this, the one thing that you absolutely want to do is you want to put a backer board in here, especially because the width of our support against the fence is far shorter than the length of the piece that we're working with. So you want to put a backer board to essentially increase the support that we have against the fence relative to the width of the workpiece. I'm going to clamp this down so that everything feels nice and solid, and then I'm going to push into the cut. I'm going to go past the board that we're working on, and the advantage to this backer board, in addition to the fence support, is the support on the end of the cut on this piece so that it prevents tear out on this end. We can expect to see a little bit of tear out on the front here. All right, so with the dovetail channel made in here, we now need to focus on what it is that we're going to actually insert into that channel. And for something like this, I think contrasting piece of wood works the best. And what I have with me is a piece of scrap paduk. This is about, I want to say just a little shy of 1 inch thick and just a little over 1 inch tall. And this is actually going to be perfect for something like this because we have roughly, I want to say 0.625 inches wide at the topmost and widest most part of this dovetail channel. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece, cut it to be a little oversized from that in width, so probably 0.7 or so, and I'm going to leave the height a little over 1 inches as is. Okay, so back at the router table, we are still with the same router dovetail bit that we had installed, and I kind of snuck up the fence to the point where the lowest portion of the router bit touches just the edge of the piece of wood in that bottom corner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pass down this way, and then I'm also going to take a pass on the other side. I'm going to leave the top section fully available as support pieces. And the reason why I'm going to take a cut on both sides first without, doing the top and bottom of each side is because I want to sneak up on this cut and make sure that we have at least one section, so the top or the bottom, it doesn't really matter, at least one section that's going to fit really nicely into our candle holder. And then the opposing side is really not going to be in any joinery. So even if we make a little bit of mistake there, that's okay. I want to make sure at least one end is good. So that's why we're going to make one pass down this way. We're going to make another pass on the other side, leave the top section on each side as support so that we can ride on the fence, and we're going to sneak up on it until we get the perfect fit. Oh, and I forgot to mention, a cut like this really requires a lot of support in order to get nice consistent cut, and also it's safer. So unfortunately you won't be able to see the cutting action all that well, and I apologize for that, but I also do want to make sure that this cut is done in a safe manner. All right, so after a couple of tries, taking very, very small passes, I think we were able to get it so that it fits just right. So this is perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the cut on the other side, And because we're referencing on this tiny little corner on the router fence, this might not be the most perfect cut, and that's okay, as long as we utilize the top section for the actual joinery part. And this is what the finished product looks like. While this may seem very, very tedious to do, you really only have to set up the router table once to be able to make this, and then you can batch out a whole bunch of them, because the idea is that this particular profile is designed to fit that specific dovetail bit. So really, if you make 15, 20, 30 of these ahead of time, you never have to do this again for the foreseeable future, and then you can just make the top portion and put the two pieces together as you need it as you're selling more and more products. All right, let's now turn our focus onto these holes. So of course the middle one is the easiest, right? So this is 13 inches in length, so the center is 6.5 inches. And then I believe we went out 3.5 inches, and it's a little hard to tell, but we went out from center to center 3.5 inches outward, 3.5 inches outward on this side. And that gives us roughly, not exactly, but roughly 2 inches of space in between each of these candles, as well as off to the edge. As far as the actual diameter of this hole goes, I think most tealight candle holders are just a little undersized of 1.5 inches. And while you may feel very, very tempted to just drill a 1.5 inch hole in here, and that's going to fit, vast majority of your tealight candle holders just fine, I find it that sometimes they don't make these in the most perfect shapes, and then they can actually get stuck in here, and that becomes a pain, to take them out, because you don't have a whole lot of leverage to be able to take these out. The other reason is there's an air pocket available surrounding the tealight candle that allows some of the heat to escape, and I think ultimately it's safer. So the size that I use for all of my tealight candles is a Forstner Bit using 1 inch and 5/8. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mount the Forstner Bit in here. There we go. And I also, while doing this, I want to take the opportunity to say that, if you don't have a drill press, it's helpful to have one for sure in woodworking, but I can see why, most people wouldn't want one, because it's not something that you use often. You can use a hand drill just free-handed, and that would be fine. You're not going to get the most consistent results, but you can make it work. The other thing is you can also get a guide for your hand drill, and that's going to let you drill perfectly perpendicular holes. So that might be more practical for you to have than a drill press if you're not really looking to make that kind of an investment at this point in time. All right, so with the holes finished, we can now sand everything and get this ready for glue up. So very little glue in here, as you can see, and now we can drive this in. After the last time I tried to drive something like this in, I'm really hoping this is a painless process. Here we go. All right, at this point we can let the glue dry, and we will be right back. So with the glue dried and having a nice reference edge on one side, we can trim off a little bit of excess from both sides. We can now break all of the hard edges using a fine grit sandpaper. For finishing, you can really do anything you want. You could do spray finish with lacquer, you can do water-based finish, you can do oil-based finish. It doesn't really matter all that much. In my case, I'm doing Watco Danish oil just because it's easy to apply, and we're not really looking for a whole lot of durability from this finish, and it works well for this purpose. So this is what the finished product looks like. As you can see, there's the dovetails in here, and I really think the dovetails add the it factor, right? It's kind of unique. You won't really see these around much at all. Some people might not care, but I find that quite a few people actually do care about the fact that it is made with so much attention to detail. So I'm going to put in the little candles in here, and that's what it looks like. Now, I recognize that the dovetails are hard to do. They require extra tools like the router table, and it may not always be possible. So what I recommend for those of you who are not able to do that particular dovetail project is by using a flared out angle. I've used 30-degree angles in here, and this was all done on a table saw. If you want to learn a little bit more about how to do these channels in here, I will put up a link on the video that shows you how I did them on a step stool build, and the concept of that applies directly to this. So again, this is something you can do without using a router table, and is a little easier to do and probably is a little faster. And you don't have to be married to this design, right? You can make it taller, longer, you can have it hold more candles. It doesn't really matter. Whatever it is that works well for you, that you're interested in, and whatever it is that your clientele wants, is perfectly fine. As far as pricing goes, I believe I have priced these at somewhere around $55 to $65 a piece, and I think it depends on the species of wood that I did. And that price might be too much or too little. It really depends on your clientele and depends on you, the person who's making the product. So adjust all of those things accordingly. Well, that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to click the like button below. Consider subscribing to my channel if you're not a subscriber already for more future content like this. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate your support, and I will see you on the next one.